On ET Now with me, Sumita Karir, and my colleague Shivani Garat. In fact, tonight on the show, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be focusing once again on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East that has led to a freeze in traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical choke point that's carrying about 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Now, Iran's retaliatory actions following the United States and Israeli strikes have disrupted tanker flows, causing crude prices to surge and throwing President Trump's efforts to dictate global oil dynamics into a complete disarray. Now, despite Donald Trump's announcements of U.S. Navy escorts and political risk insurance for tankers via the Development Finance Corporation, shipping remains cautious, keeping energy markets on the edge. Now, in a significant development for India as well, the United States, just in the wee hours of this morning, issued a 30-day temporary waiver allowing Indian refiners to purchase Russian oil, specifically cargoes already loaded and stranded at sea as of March 5th, valid until early April. Now, this move aims to prevent a sharper global supply crunch during the crisis, even as broader sanctions on Russia persist and limit financial benefits to Moscow. So an important development that's coming in from the United States as far as energy purchases of India is concerned, Shibani, and we'll have to see the ramifications of that on the overall energy trade and what really happens after these 30 days.
Right. In fact, this waiver provides some sort of immediate breather for India's refining companies, which rely heavily on discounted Russian crude, especially as West Asian supplies face uncertainty from Hormuz disruption. The announcement came just a day after U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau, speaking at the Raisina dialogue, urged India to diversify away from Russian oil and view United States as a strong, reliable alternative energy source, stating there is no better alternative than America for meeting India's long-term needs. As the situation evolves, questions remain. Will this short-term relief hold, or will India accelerate shift towards U.S. and other non-Russian supplies? To discuss this and more, today we are joined in by Narendra Taneja. He is an energy expert, and Bjarne, who's the chief commodity analyst at SEB Global. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. And Bjarne, I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
That's good enough, Bjarne. That's the way to pronounce it. Right. It's good enough. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Bjarne, let's get over to you first. Does this, what does this 30-day waiver actually really mean for India? Is it significant enough?
It is a buffer. We have oil at sea currently due to sanctioned Russian crude and Iranian crude. We have 240 million barrels of oil more than normal at sea. So when you choke off the Strait of Hormuz, which normally exports 20 million barrels per day of crude and products, we basically have a buffer of 12 days above normal oil at sea. So it's a very nice buffer. And this is one of the reasons why crude oil hasn't spiked as heavily as other oil products and natural gas. I mean, natural gas, LNG prices doubled overnight, while diesel prices in Europe are up 70%. Crude oil so far is up much less.
Right, Bjarne, that's an important point that you've made, and we'll discuss a bit more about the energy markets and what this move essentially means, particularly for India's trade with Russia and, of course, on India's energy security. But let me come to you, Mr. Taneja. Mr. Taneja, like I said, that we'll talk about the energy aspects later, but who is America to dictate terms to India on buying Russian oil, especially when the Indian government has made its sourcing decisions amply clear, the strategy amply clear, that India is going to purchase from geographies which offer an affordable rate, and that rate should be in national interest and in the interest of its industry. What is the thinking of the United States behind this, behind the mandating this 30-day window or providing this leeway of 30 days?
I agree with your sentiments. I mean, it's our money, it's our market, and we have known Russia for a long time. We have very good ties with Russia. So I really don't understand. Look at the language being used for a friendly country of India. We are very sensitive to the language that we use. We are an ancient civilization, ancient culture. And our language is, Sanskrit is like among the oldest in the world. But look at the language used by the Commerce Secretary of the US. Is that the kind of language you use for a friend? You're giving exemption, you're giving permission. Do we need your permission? We import oil from 41 different countries around the world. And America is one of them. Russia is one of them. As part of the trade deal, we might make some adjustments here and there. You do some adjustment and we do some adjustment. That's a totally different thing. But to say that we basically suggesting that we need your permission and using such a language on a public platform, maybe you're using it for your domestic consumption, your home consumption and all that. But I think it's important to use a language that's a kind of, especially for cultures like India, where language actually our people are extremely sensitive to the kind of language used. That said, at the same time, I think government of India, to the best of my knowledge, have never ever said that we are going to cut down reduce oil sourcing from country X or country Y. It's left to the companies. It's economics. It's demand and supply. And America is a major producer and supplier. Russia is a major supplier. So in the circumstances, I think our companies are going to go out and see where they can source oil from. But at the same time, we are, in the process of concluding a trade deal with the US. There's some give and take. And our government, our negotiators are going to study what is good for us, what is good for the US.
Absolutely, Mr. Taneja.
That's the kind of language one should use.
Yeah, the language, the choice of words and the language used is not that of a friend, and you made a fair point saying that. But having said that, does this 30-day waiver to India signal that, Trump has probably hit like that oil pain point and, wants to salvage the situation effectively, by taking this U-turn to avoid or prevent that $100, Brent before elections?
Well, that's a good question. You see, the point is we have to think more in the context of the global oil supply system. I mean, if Russian oil is completely out of the global supply system, let's say the oil that part of the oil that India used to buy, and if at the same time oil from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, that's also, if not fully, at least partially out of the system, then we are talking of oil prices in the region of $120 to $140 per barrel. Is that what America can afford? Can they afford it? Can President Trump afford it? Especially in the year when his party is going to face election, American consumer is not used to expensive oil. So I think whatever America is trying to do in terms of giving exemption to country X or country Y and all that, that's more to protect its own economy, its own interest. The point here I'm trying to make is that, main problem is not the actually availability of oil. Saudi Aramco has oil, Kuwait has, they all have oil. The only thing is America is talking about that they're going to secure, Strait of Hormuz for shipping. They have not been able to do it. They should focus on that. That is what is important. If they have the capacity, then America, together with other countries, fellow countries, they should secure a passage, maybe 5 kilometer width or 8 kilometer, whatever it is, so that the movement of tankers, both carrying crude oil and LNG, can start. That's the challenge. They have to do it as fast as possible. They promised to do it, but so far they have not been able to walk the talk. Let them walk the talk first.
Absolutely. They've not. Absolutely, Mr. Taneja. And of course, we did hear a senior U.S. government official at Raisina Dialogue yesterday, and he said that, energy security or the energy pillar is an important pillar for both the countries, and the U.S. can meet energy needs of India. But where is the focus of the U.S.? That remains to be seen. But let me ask you another follow-up question, what we were earlier discussing today on how Donald Trump's administration is sort of, directing how India should perhaps, move with respect to its energy security needs. Now, if we go back to 2012, when the UPA was in power, Hillary Clinton also reportedly directed multiple countries, including India, to cut down the volume of oil imports from Iran. So are these sanctions by both the previous administration and this current administration merely tools of convenience for the United States rather than as instruments of policy?
Let me answer the funny part.
No.
You see, let me
Mr. Taneja, if you could respond to that, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Shcieldrop.
You see, the funny part first. The funny part is that, today, we have invested roughly $18 billion in Russia in oil and gas assets. In simple language, on oil wells. You know who took us to Russia? The US. An American company called ExxonMobil. They took us there. And we invested together in a project called Sakhalin-1, which was, and ExxonMobil was operating. They were the one who took us. And later on, we invested heavily in other parts of Russia as well. Now, the question here is that when it comes to, we import 89% of our oil requirement. We have one of the fastest economies on the planet. And we also import bulk of our natural gas, even uranium, and even, a lot of other things, especially for solar power. We have to focus on our security, and our energy requirement is such that we have no alternative but to import even more. Look, today we are importing 5.2 million barrels of oil. By the 2030, we'll be probably importing 6.5 million barrels of oil every day, and maybe 2050, maybe 9 million barrels of oil. So we have to work out our own system. We will decide where to get it from and all that. It's important that we assert when it comes to strategic autonomy, we assert in terms of energy security. We are going to decide. We are very good to have friends like Russia, very good to have friends like the United States. But this is business. This is economics. And when it comes to economics, I think it's important that, all those decisions are taken, and that's what we do in New Delhi, in no other capital, no other place. At the same time, demand and supply, we understand. Economics, we understand. Let economic play out. Let demand supply factors play out. But we have very friendly relations with most of the Arab countries and majority of other oil producers, including the US. The US is the biggest producer of oil in the world. We want to import more. Now, in the present situation, we can't ship LNG from Qatar to India. Now, where do we go? America is, they don't have any extra capacity to export LNG. Do they have? They don't have. Then where do we go? We have to now hunt for other markets. We have to hunt for other suppliers, or we have to buy from the spot market. And there the economics is going to be difficult.
Right. Let's go on to Mr. Bjarne. Thanks for patiently waiting for your turn. But I have, two questions to you, in fact. Many are calling this U-turn the biggest bluff in the history. So who blinked first? Is it, Trump by issuing this waiver, or Iran by forcing the freeze? And then, is that $100 a barrel like a psychological meme, so to speak, in this whole conversation, or it's a mathematical certainty if the freeze goes on till April?
Well, I think the biggest bluff was the negotiations, and they were basically intending to attack Iran all the time. And one thing it's important to remember here is that the Strait of Hormuz has never been closed before in history for a full day. So no one really knew what to expect. And what we see now is increasing stress around the world because it's such a complex web of logistics. And suddenly you disable the most important part of the whole system. So we have a lot of shipping companies as clients around the world, and they are reporting that they are not able to buy the fuel they need to run their ships around India, around Singapore, around Fujairah, and around in Europe, where diesel prices are up more than 70%. So extreme stress in the oil products, where you have low inventories of diesel already. And today we see Brent crude heading to $90, and logistics is in a jam on shipping increasingly. So I think it's clear that if this closure of the Strait of Hormuz continues for another 5 days, this stress is just going to continue more and more and be more and more extreme. And you're going to see definitely Brent crude hitting $100 and above.
Right. Bjarne, I have a follow-up question to that. You're saying that it is, of course, not further from true that Brent is going to hit $100 a barrel. The question is, when is that going to happen? Now, if you really see Donald Trump's or the administration of the US, their commentary, they have given this 30-day reprieve to India. But if you read into the fine print, what does this essentially tell you about the duration of the war? Is the United States working with the fact that the war is not going to last beyond a month?
I think even if the administration in the US knew that the Strait of Hormuz could be closed, they definitely had hoped it wouldn't happen, and now it did. And they see this increasing stress. They know it is 240 million barrels of oil at sea more than normal. So they want to make sure that this above normal amount of crude at sea actually is being consumed quickly and easily by anyone who might want it. So Russian crude at sea, please go ahead, everyone consume it so that we don't get so much stress in the crude market. So I think within 30 days, this above normal crude at sea will have been consumed, and we are then down to normal. Actually, it will happen in only 10 days, so long before the end of April. So this is a sign that things are not going quite according to plan of the U.S. administration, that they have to lift these restrictions on sanctioned Russian oil and instead allow India actually to consume it without any repercussions.
Right. Let's get on with you, Mr. Taneja. If you can help us understand, the entire crude oil and oil economy, so to speak. How much of oil do we get in from the Persian Gulf crude, and how much does India get its supplies met from Russia currently? And if this, if the dependency on, the imports of oil from Russia, if, in that 30-day waiver period had to be increased, what is the kind of impact that India will have, in terms of logistics, in terms of monies, is it going to be a logistics nightmare at all?
Well, you see, I mean, as I said earlier, we import 5.2 million barrels of oil every day. And roughly 60% of that comes from the region where the war is going on. So for us, the important thing is basically two. Number one is that if war goes on beyond 10 days from now, let's say beyond 10 days from now, then we are talking of very, very difficult economics when it comes to the price of oil and gas. Second, what is needed this day, even if the war goes on, but if the US and others powers in the region or military forces, they can secure the Strait of Hormuz by making sure that, Iranian boats, speedboats, and, drones can't attack the tankers. Foreign Minister of Iran has said repeatedly, we have not closed the Strait of Hormuz. But at the same time, Revolutionary Guard, they are sending radio message to every single tanker saying, look, don't dare to cross the Strait of Hormuz. So we are getting conflicting signals out of Tehran. That is the issue. But if America and others can secure the Strait of Hormuz, I think then oil prices will begin to stabilize and may even begin to go down, even if the war goes on. The Strait of Hormuz, if it's open, is working, traffic starts, then I think we should not worry too much about oil prices.
Yes, Mr. Taneja, let me also tell you that a Financial Times report essentially mentions that Gulf countries have threatened to shut down oil exports. And in fact, they've also said that could happen within weeks and perhaps oil could hit $150 a barrel. Do you think that move by Gulf countries, or perhaps a threat that's been issued, that could come as an off-ramp?
No, I think this message has come from Qatar and other places. This is, you don't shut down oil production like that. That's not how it works, the oil industry, when you look at very carefully. And moreover, they also have capacity. Saudi Aramco has capacity to store, and other countries also. That's not I think that basically they're making this statement to send a message that, look, stop the war and open the Strait of Hormuz. So it's a put a pressure, as I said. But otherwise, the point is, if the ships can't move, from the Strait of Hormuz or and back and forth, then what option they have but to stop the production? Qatar has already stopped the production of LNG because they didn't have the capacity to store. Yeah. The country or the company that does have the capacity to store would have no option but to shut down the production. Right.
Let's get on now with Bjarne's reaction on this. Does the US have ammunition endurance to, let's say, forcefully reopen the Strait of Hormuz by force? Or is there any danger, any implication there if US tries to do that?
Well, I think there's several aspects here. The first is that the general assumption is that Iran will not be able to close the Strait of Hormuz fully over a long time. And now it's fully closed, essentially fully closed. But, if they shoot the rocket once a week, and you need to escort every supertanker with US warships through the strait, then the flow of oil going out of the Strait of Hormuz will not be normal. It will be significantly reduced. either by 2 million barrels below normal or 5 million barrels below normal, that is still significant. And Iran is using oil as a weapon of deterrence. I mean, Iran hoped to have nuclear weapons as a deterrence of being attacked. Now they don't have that,
right.
So they're using oil as a deterrence instead.
Absolutely, but whether that is going to work or not, that remains to be seen. On that note, thank you very much, Mr. Taneja and Mr. Shcieldrop, for taking the time out and joining us on this very crucial story that we're tracking here on India Tonight. Thanks very much once again for